If everyone could take their seats, please. I'd like to call to order tonight's meeting, regular meeting of the CUSD 201 Board of Education, Tuesday, December 11th, 2018, and roll call, please.
Mr. Armstrong. Mrs. Charlton.
Here.
Mrs. Coyle.
Here.
Mr. Price.
Here.
Mr. Rudy.
Here.
Mr. Strohmeyer. Ms. Wilson.
Yes.
Thank you.
If we could stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, the first item on the agenda is the public hearing on the tentative tax levy.
All right, the tax levy, the truth and taxation notice was published in the Liberty Suburban Chicago newspaper on Wednesday.
I think I have to read this
Oh,
one.
sorry.
So I just do it. Okay, the President of the Board of Education calls the public hearing to order regarding the proposed 2018 tax levy. Business Manager Kim Anderson will review the proposed 2018 tax levy.
Okay, sorry, now my turn. The truth and taxation notice was published in the Liberty Suburban Chicago newspaper on Wednesday, November 28th, and we're having the public hearing this evening. And I'll just review the levy recommendation by fund. In the education fund, $18 million. Special education fund, $3,400,000. Tort, $120,000. Operations and maintenance fund, $3 million. Transportation fund, $1,200,000. IMRF, $400,000. Social Security, $475,000. The total levy of $26,595,000. Does anybody have questions or comments?
Okay, the President asks if there are additional comments from the members of the Board of Education regarding the proposed 2018 tax levy. The President asks if there are any public comments concerning the proposed 2018 tax levy. The President then declares the public hearing on the proposed 2018 tax levy is closed. Do you need that?
Thank you.
Okay, the next item is approval of minutes. The Chair will entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the November 13, 2018 regular meeting of the Board of Education as presented.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. The Chair will entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the closed session of the November 13, 2018 regular meeting of the Board of Education as presented.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We need to set a secretary pro tem for this meeting. Do I have any volunteers? Mr. Price, thank you. The Chair will entertain a motion to appoint Joel Price as secretary pro tem for this December 11, 2018 regular meeting of the Board of Education as presented.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Public comments, are there any public comments? Okay, well, we have one thing that we would like to do. We would like to take a few moments to recognize our attorney, our outgoing attorney. What do we want to do? Do we want to have her come up here?
Sure.
Or come
we
up
can have
here? Terry, come on up here. Come on back here. All right, this is Terry Hodges, who has been our lead counsel for the past 10 years.
Is it that long?
The CUSD 201 Board of Education and Community Unit School District would like to take a moment to recognize you, Terry, as a partner of Hodges Luigi. Terry has been the lead counsel for the school district for approximately 10 years, and you are retiring December 31st, 2018. I say that like I'm asking you. Right. The CUSD2 Board of Education and School Community would like to thank you for your years of service, guidance, and friendship. We would like to thank you, personally, I would like to thank you for your counsel for all of these years. Your firm came in at a time that there was, let's say, a lot of changes happening, and you were extremely knowledgeable and helped us navigate through that. You have been extremely instrumental in myself as board president being able to reach out to you, and you've always steered me personally correct. I know you have a wonderful relationship with Kevin and Kim and Linda and many others. You've always been a phone call away. I am going to have to not do that anymore. One of your partners will be taking over as our new lead counsel, and hopefully we'll get have a chance to introduce him to everybody in the near future. You have been extremely versed in negotiations, and even when those negotiations go very late into the evening.
That's right. Like
So-
our last Friday night, 2 years ago, into Saturday morning.
Yes. So first, I wanted to see if anyone else had anything to add.
I don't have a lot more to add than what you were already saying, but Terry, thank you so much for your guidance and your counsel, especially very early on when we were all new board members and struggling to understand the duties and responsibilities and the authority that we had to move the district in the direction we wanted to move it and in the proper way. So I thank you for all of that and your continued support throughout your
Appreciate
service
that,
with our
Joe.
district. Thank you.
You know, over 41 years is a long career, especially in school law, because it was essentially in its infancy in the mid-1970s when I started. And my favorite example is the size of the school code. It was this thin and is now this thick when you get it from the School Board Association. But I think what's been my greatest pleasure actually has been to deal with school board members, lay people that need to understand, you know, what they have to do in the way of board governance and what their powers are. And I've prided myself on hopefully making it clear in a way that lay individuals who give up so much volunteer time to serve on a school board can understand. So it's been wonderful working for you. I love my neighborhood school districts. I'm not that far away. So it's been a pleasure. Appreciate it.
Well, we would like to present you with this plaque that we hope you
Oh, thank you so
remember
much.
us. This is just something from myself.
Thank you, thank you. Marie?
We will miss you. We will miss you.
You know,
We will miss you.
school districts do go through ups and downs, and I think that's something you have to recognize. It's been so nice you're in a down period for a lot of years. And that's great.
We're very happy.
And I don't mean down, I mean
No,
level.
quiet.
Right?
Quiet. And a lot of people work very hard to get that way, and thank you for your wisdom
Thank you.
and counsel.
Appreciate
So,
it, and I'll miss you all.
you.
All right.
But now I can go hear who won the voice, right?
Thank you, Terry. I'm nervous when you're in the room, like I have to do it right. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. Does anyone have any questions or comments? The chair will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented. Number 1, personnel recommendations. Number 2, approval of board travel expenses. 3, renewal of SSCIP insurance agreement. 4, approval of intergovernmental agreement for access to Haven program. 5, approval of AFR shared services on outsourcing requirement report. 6, approval of additional November 2018 expenditure report. 7, approval of December 2018 expenditure report. And 8, ratification of November 2018 regular payroll.
So moved.
Second.
And roll call, please.
Mrs. Coyle?
Yes.
Mr. Price?
Yes.
Mr. Rudy?
Yes.
Ms. Wilson,
Yes.
Mrs. Charlton.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, motion carried. Okay, the next item is going to be an information discussion item, update on Common Core math implementation at Westmont High School. And we have Mr. Mark Delisle here
With his cheering section.
with his chairing section.
It's true. All right. So, first of all, thank you for inviting us for the update. And I think we were here 5 years ago giving you information about why we wanted to transition from a traditional math curriculum to a integrated math curriculum. So that's what this presentation is going to be about. Kevin Carey said that I have 2 or 3 hours to talk about it, so I have my binder and
Really?
my PowerPoint.
No,
I don't know if I'll use all that time, but we'll.
I think public comment's 5 minutes, right? You can have all the time you need, Mark.
No, we'll speed through. And stop me at any point if you have questions or anything else, if you have comments or anything. So, but first I have to thank the amazing department that we have here. Erin Morose, who is not here, she's on mommy duty for an infant son who's a couple months old. So she's at home working on that. We have Laura Brigandi, who teaches mostly Math 2 in our college readiness course. We have Katrina Zorbas, who teaches Math 3. And then we have Heidi Nardini, who is our newbie. So I was going to have her come and just stand right next to me as initiation, but she teaches mostly Math 1, and then she teaches a stats course to seniors. And then I'm Mark Delisle, who doesn't do much. No, I teach honors pre-calc, AP statistics, and college algebra. So it's mostly our senior electives or our junior honors courses. So I also have to acknowledge the administration and the board for allowing us to make that switch. There was a lot of school districts, a lot of math teachers want to make that transition, and it kind of gets caught up in paperwork and administration, and they never quite make the change. That's one great thing about Westmont. When we want to do stuff and we have the data to back that change up, we can usually make that change pretty quick, and we got a lot of support from the administration and the board, who approved a lot of resources for us. I also have to thank the junior high, we did a lot of this work with them to make sure it's a smooth transition. And I know the work that you'll see here and the data that you'll see here, they have stuff that's very similar, looking through their materials and looking at their data. And then we have to thank the consultant, Jessica Knoll McIntyre. Is it McIntyre? Yeah. Who really was like our shepherd through a lot of this stuff and really like put us on the right path. So, the team did a lot of hard work doing that, but she kind of steered us in the right direction. All right, so what did we do? Is the next slide here. Let me get this all figured out. So basically what we did was we had a traditional course, which was Algebra 1, Geometry, Advanced Math, and then the senior math options. And we converted that into integrated math. And most of us in this room probably had that traditional pathway. That's what we're used to teaching. Freshman year, you take algebra. If you're advanced, you take geometry, and you kind of go through that sequence. What we did was switched it to Math 1, Math 2, Math 3, and then still our senior options. And just a summary of why we wanted to make that change is the first one is that integrated math promotes problem-solving skills that encourage students to use all of the skills, the algebra, the geometry, the statistics, the number sense, in one classroom. And it's really it's the way the rest of the world teaches math. They don't, when I talk to the Taiwanese students who are in, they don't have like a geometry class. They just have 9th grade math. It's just called math, and it just integrates all of that stuff into there. United States is very unique with that traditional pathway of algebra, then do your geometry, and then do your advanced algebra. The spiral review aspect of this, it encourages mastery, so you're always coming back to it, and it allows you to really master the skills. And then the flexibility to move units. So when you're teaching geometry, it's very difficult to take an algebra unit that our kids struggled with and put it into a geometry class. It just doesn't fit. But now that we're integrated, if the kids struggled with, say, circles, we can now move circles into Math 2, or we can take circles from Honors Math 3 and put it into pre-calc. So those units we can move around based on the needs of the students. And we feel it was really a home run, because the new essay, when we started this, we were taking a PARCC test, which was very integrated, very Common Core-ish, and we really needed those skills of taking geometry and algebra and mixing them together. And then SAT came along, and SAT has very few geometry questions on it. So we would have been taking our kids out of algebra, teaching them a full year of geometry, and taking them away from algebra, and then giving them the SAT, which is mostly an algebra test. So right now, the geometry is all mixed into that. So we feel it was a home run, and the data later on will hopefully show that. So that's basically what the reason why we did that. So it takes a lot of work to come up with an integrated math, the Math 1, Math 2, Math 3 sequence, because there's not a built curriculum that you can just go and grab. In fact, 5 years ago, when we were looking at this, there was a lot of bad curriculums that we just could not give to our kids, and they're expensive, and you have to update them all the time. So we decided as a department that we were going to do the hard work to kind of create all of this stuff. So we broke down the Common Core curriculum. We figured out what we needed to teach. We created units based on the assessments. So we looked at Common Core and said this would assess that standard, and then we built units around those assessments. And then we kind of logically laid out the units, like, okay, they need to know this before they know this. This definitely needs to come before SAT. Or this is not tested on SAT, so let's move it after the April test. So let's move that towards the end. And that took a lot of time, and with the math consultant and the team making all those discussions, we laid out what we think is an excellent curriculum. This is an example of kind of our curriculum map at the beginning that we had. How many days is that going to take? What standards are we going to meet in that unit? So then from there, we kind of built our day-to-day stuff. So this is an example from Unit 1, Math 3. And it's all kind of nicely highlighted. And this is an incredible amount of work to take all those standards. And from the standards, we made clear learning targets, in student-friendly language. And from those learning targets, we knew the SAT was going to be around, so we started making basically our SAT targets to make sure we were covering the entire SAT test. So after we got all that done, so now we're teaching this stuff, we use Mastery Connect. And Mastery Connect is kind of our data program that the district purchased. And what Mastery Connect does is it gives us the ability to kind of go student by student, standard by standard, and see what they're mastering and what they're not mastering and what they're close on. And allows us to give students printouts and say, you're really struggling with a PSDA 1. And they would know that language. We wouldn't give them the code. We would tell them, like, here's what you're struggling with. Let's work on this precisely. So our goal is to always give kids a clear target on how they could improve. So we're not saying, here's your chapter test, get better, or here's your SAT, get better. the Mastery Connect allows us to go target by target, student by student, and give them a clear path to getting better. And our feeling has always kind of been, if we can measure it, you can change it. So if they know they're doing poorly, then we can change it. If they don't know they're doing poorly, then there's no plan for them to get better. It's going to happen by accident if it does. And we use this a lot for, we do kind of our own practice SATs throughout the year, and we grade them. It's actually the math department that runs them. We grade them as they're taking them using Mastery Connect. We print out sheets for them and we hold it up to the computer, and the camera looks at it and grades it and puts it into Mastery Connect, which is amazing technology. So instead of running it through the Scantron or hand grading all of those, so the math teachers just sit there, and as they're grading them, we scan it in, and the kids now have the expectation as they're leaving, you know, they'll stop and ask, like, hey, what did I get on English? What did I get on math? And they'll start doing the conversions. So we've kind of built that culture of, did I get better? Like, am I growing on that test? And kids are more prepared for the test, and they don't get nervous anymore. When we used to give practice tests, they would be, you know, oh, I have to take the SAT. Do I have my 5 calculators with all the batteries and 3 drinks and 10 pencils? It's not like that anymore. They come in. You almost don't have to read the directions because they're so used to it. We kind of built that environment. So what we do after we put in the scores for the SAT, we actually track all of their scores. So this is an example of a spreadsheet, and obviously we blocked out the names on the left-hand side there. And this would be last year's juniors, and we keep all of their scores. So in sophomore year, they take 2 practice SATs. It's like a pre and post. So we see how the curriculum's doing, how much they grew, and then that's all of their SAT scores. And you can kind of see a lot of them just from this image, a lot of them going from red to yellow to green. And green is over 540, which is what the state standards is for meet or exceeds. College readiness, by the way, is 530 or 520, depending on the age of the student. So the state standards is actually above college readiness number. Again, if you have questions. So there's been a lot of things that have gone well. Our PLCs, so we meet on Tuesday mornings. We have the math department kind of decided that we're going to take a piece of our day out to meet all together. So we actually meet on Tuesday mornings, which frees up our Wednesday after school to work with kids during the ASAP time, because we were noticing our struggling kids. We knew they were struggling, and we knew we wanted to meet with them, but nobody was there to help them with their math. And you can't just plug anybody in with the math curriculum. So we decided to give up some time during our day during the week so that it frees up that hour that we can work with struggling students and run some interventions. So we meet during the day, and our PLC runs much smoother because we have all of this fresh data from Mastery Connect and sample assessments in class and our sample data. So that has gone very well for us. Since algebra is in every course, there's a lot less review time that we need because they're constantly reviewing it. The spiraling of topics is strengthening the basic skills, the ability to move units from year to year to meet student needs, and moving difficult topics out of freshman year and into later classes so students are more mature. We used to have a terrible time with freshman algebra, and I don't know if you remember either when your kids went through it or when you went through it. Algebra used to be the most difficult topic. They had all the difficult topics in the freshman year. Our quadratic units, which used to be in freshman year, is still our most difficult topics. And our sophomores and juniors still struggle with it. And I remember when I first started trying to teach, and it seemed like always the freshman boys who couldn't remember to bring their backpack or their pencil or anything else, these difficult topics. So that has really helped us to take that and move it out of a traditional algebra and teach them things like number sense and exponential functions and all that, which are a little bit easier, and wait till they're a little more mature, if we ever get more mature. So because of our data team and the way that our PLCs have run, we've actually had several schools come to visit us to learn what we do and how we implement our plan. And then we have several more who are also scheduled to come from around the country, actually. Our department has been recognized as a model data team at national conferences, and our math scores helped to earn Westmont High School recognition as an exemplary school. So that's what has gone well.
Mark, you want to move the
What's that?
The slides.
slide?
Oh, thanks. So, what has been a challenge? Creating our own curriculum has been very, very time consuming. So we make every test, every quiz, every homework. There's no book, there's no website, we create all of that stuff. So that has been very time consuming, but it's been good work. It was hard work, but it's been really good work because we know our curriculum really well. We know the SAT real well, so we know everything is built exactly for our kids. Having the time to get through a challenging curriculum has been a little, we definitely upped the rigor. And so getting through all of those units has been a bit of a challenge. And then finding the time to meet with students who are struggling a little bit so they keep pace with that. We don't want anybody falling behind. So we need to keep them up to date. And the teachers kind of miss what they traditionally taught. So for example, Laura Brigandi was like the queen of geometry. So she misses teaching some of the geometry topics, or Erin really loves the Math 3 or the advanced algebra curriculum. She loved a lot of those topics, and now some of those got moved out and some of them got moved up. So some of us kind of yearn for that, like we want to teach what we really taught for a long time. And then one issue that we have a lot of schools talk about, and we talked about it early on, was what do you do with a student moving in who's from a traditional school? And we just don't have a lot of issues with that, and it seems to be a hurdle that schools that come to talk to us, they just can't get past it. Like, what do we do with a kid who has had traditional algebra? And we just work hard to remediate those students. They come in during lunch, they come in during our ASAP time. And we haven't seen it as a big issue. I mean, it takes time out of our schedule, but they usually catch up pretty quickly. So how do we measure success? One thing that the best aspect of our department is our rapport with the kids. If we didn't have a good rapport with the kids, and kids enjoy going to math class, if not for the math, at least to see their teachers, which is unique for math teachers because, we get a lot of complaints about the math. But if we didn't have this, the rest of this data really, it wouldn't come. So the best thing about our department is the rapport we have with kids. All of us stay in during lunch to help kids, stay after school, stay before school. We just don't let kids fail. So without that aspect to the department, the rest of this really wouldn't happen. So that's like our top thing, but how do you measure that? So some of this success is really measuring that rapport we have with the students. So I know Jack has shown you some of this, but it's my data, so I'll show it to you. So our SAT score was the 43rd highest out of 653 high schools, which puts us in the top 7% of the state. And I wish I had a pointer, but if you look at that, if you go to the upper right-hand corner, that would be like, in that graph, that would be like where Jaime Escalante would be. So that's a school that's 100% low income with really high test scores. And if you look at the bottom left, the bottom left, if you're in the bottom left, you're basically going to lose your job, because that you have really low scores, but you have low income. So you can see we're right in the middle, but if you look at the top of ours, so we're that red triangle. So you can see for the schools like us, we are the top. Now, there is that one point, if you look, those points kind of in the middle at the top, all of those, Vanna White is going to. So those right there, those are all charter schools, which have select enrollment and all of that. So when you look at us, there's nobody by us. Now, what we do is, since we're very competitive, is we kind of pick out schools that we want to kind of take down. So there are some schools, I mean, right now we took care of everybody in our percentage. There's some schools a little bit who have less low-income kids that we would like to tackle. We won't say them out loud, but they're close to us. But we have already, if you look in that, so if you made a quadrant through that triangle, that lower box, the lower left-hand box, there are some great schools in there that if you just go on the Illinois report card and click on those, there are some great schools in there that we are, that right now we are beating, including all of the Glenbard schools and basically most of the schools around us. Yeah. So our school average was 546.8 when we started. We wanted our average to be above the 540. And when we started the school year at 510. So within the one school year, we rose that up. And the state average is 501.4. Sorry, I'm kind of a data geek, so. So that's basically what I already talked about. Missed one on college. So another thing that we like to use is our college remediation percent. So that's the students who move on from Westmont High School and they go to college and they have to take a remedial math course their first year. So right now we're at 27% of our students, which seems like a lot. State average is 37%, so this is one of our targets. And this is a year behind, so obviously our juniors from last year, so our state data, we still have our seniors, so that this year's data will go with next year's seniors, or next year's graduating seniors. So that's one thing we do want to lower. COD, and I've talked to the board about this before, has one of the highest placements into remedial math courses. For whatever reason, they have crazy high standards to get into your first credit counting math course. And then over 90% of our seniors are taking an elective fourth year. So they do not have to take a math class their fourth year, and 90% of them elect to. I've been using touchscreens for too long. We also did a student survey in our Math 3 courses and for our juniors, and they were very positive on how we prepared them for the SAT. we knew that the students who went to our Wednesday interventions, we knew that they scored much higher than the students who did not go. And the kids this year, we don't have to push quite as hard because we got such good results last year, although we do still chase down students to get them to our Wednesday interventions. So we put in a couple of sample questions, and I think we're going to extend this survey this year to more of our classes. Gosh. And this just talks about how they felt they were for the SAT, and this was the day after they took the SAT. And finally, we have our AP scores. So this is for our top seniors. So we had 56%, 14 out of 25 of student pass AP stats with a 3 or higher. 55.6 out of our Calc AB and 90.9% of our Calc BC for a total of 63 AP math tests. Those are right at the national average, but we include, Jack always says we include the most in the country. We're the most inclusive school in the country, so we allow anybody to take an AP course if they want to. So we managed to stay at the national level for passing, but include more students. Yeah, so are there any questions?
So one of the things I've appreciated as this has evolved over the past couple of years, because my older kids have graduated now and went through and seem to have a little more struggle. And my final one, coming through the high school math, seems like it's more organized, more logical, it flows much better. But I like the way, and it helps me out a lot at home because I still help with math homework at home, the Chromebooks and the use of the Delta Math, the use of Khan Academy, and being able to sit with your child and kind of relearn, because as an adult, you have to go back and relearn a lot of this stuff, but to see exactly how they're working through a problem. To click on that example as they have their problem they're working on, click on that example and follow through step by step as a parent, saying, oh, okay, so that I know I'm showing them, and my instruction that I'm giving them at home is uniform with what they're learning in the classroom. And I think that's very helpful, because oftentimes in the past they'd come home with a problem and you'd be searching the internet for an example, and it might or might not be what they're familiar with, and they're like, no, it's not quite how we did it, and you'd argue, and it didn't go well. So it's nice to have that tool, I think certainly for the student, but also for somebody who's assisting them, who's obviously not sitting through the class and the coursework. So.
Yeah, and I think the advantage of that is the instant feedback. So they type what they think the answer is, and they will know whether that's right or wrong, so they're not doing 20 more problems the same exact way that they got it wrong, which traditionally that has been the case. You give them a worksheet, you send them home, and you do 20, and then they come back and they grade it, and they realize they wasted an hour doing 20 problems. And now they know right away, like, okay, I got it. So.
Yeah, except if they have to get all of them right before they can finish up that unit, and it sends them back, if they don't, then I get blamed. Because I misled them somewhere along the way. But
you're not the only one getting blamed. I hold my breath when they press the button.
Yeah, you do.
See that little green check mark?
That's right.
I just wanted to make a comment that I really like this approach. I feel like in hearing you present what you presented, that not only does it just make a lot of sense, but it also seems to me, at least from an outside perspective, that it supports the emotional aspects of sort of going through the process of learning math. I think a lot of things are about how confident a kid is in doing something, and if they're hit right off the bat with the hardest aspects of problem solving and algebra, that might transfer into them shutting down or feeling like they're not good at math. And so the ability to kind of integrate and also move harder sections, I just really appreciate that, to address that aspect of math and helping kids kind of stick with it and find places where they can shine so that they continue to have an open mind about what their abilities are.
So we're hoping, you know, whenever I'm at like a Christmas party and people find out I'm a math teacher, they always say, I was good at algebra, terrible at geometry, or vice versa. I was great at geometry, but I hated algebra.
Yep.
We're hoping that goes away. And so they can't say, I was terrible my freshman year at algebra, so now I'm going to be bad the rest of math.
Absolutely.
It kind of pushes them off, you know, gently into the math sequence. And then we hit them hard junior year.
But they're a little tougher by then, so.
Well, but you've created like Laura said, you've created a level of confidence in the students that they can attack it, and obviously they're able to make mistakes and have a softer landing along the way.
Mark, what you were just talking about, that I wanted to ask you about, because I remember when you came here and we were talking about all this, one of the meetings that we had about math was, you know, who liked algebra, and then there was like a fight over who was worse than the other, you know. So what I know what I see, but are you finding that the students are obviously the results are there, but are you finding that they're getting rid of that, like, oh, I hate this whole year? Because I know that was very important, that you're finding that you're getting rid of this like rigid, because if you hate algebra and you like geometry, you got a whole year of hating it, right?
Correct.
I remember you telling us that. So are you finding that the students are getting more comfortable and that they don't have that block that they just know?
Obviously, it's hard to measure. Mm-hmm. So I get fewer complaints about specific courses. I'll hear complaints about, I hate quadratics, or but it's not, I hate algebra. So once they get out of that unit, it's not a full year of getting beat up with it.
Right. I mean, that's, when you talked about it, I remember thinking way back to when I was in school, that same thing. You know, you got to that point of, oh God, now I got this whole year and I'm just going to hate it. That is interesting to me, that there's that integration of the math.
And it gives them some variety. I mean, sometimes they just get tired of solving for X. Like, they want to draw some pictures, or they want to look at data, or it just gives them some variety.
Right. Burn
I
out.
have very unfortunate memories of my freshman year algebra, and then I had great memories of geometry, and I have no memory of algebra 2. I just tuned it out, just like repressed it. So I think this is a great approach. Anything to integrate it.
I also have to say that I can appreciate a couple of things. First of all, this presentation I thought was very user-friendly. It makes sense, you know, so I very much appreciate that. But I appreciate the fact that you guys are reaching out to students who've graduated and find out, you know, like what's happening when they graduate. Because our goal is not just to get them out the door, but to get them ready for college. So that's very interesting, and I can very much appreciate that, how ready they are for that. I have to say Joel is a much better parent than I am, because I stopped doing math homework with my kids at like fifth grade, you know. I also have to say that as someone who currently has someone in math, I will say that student does seem to enjoy the math department, and it's not.
I may be biased, but we are the best department.
That's kind of what I thought. But think about that. I mean, we didn't have that. So to have something that was scary and to make it, because it's the kids, you got to know it, and it's going to be on the test. And
I think that says a lot about the great teachers. And Heidi, who's new, jumped right in. And Westmont kids will tell you how they feel, good or bad. And I've had zero complaints, you know, about Heidi, which is highly unusual. When people are new and kids are used to the same teachers, and they're waiting for, they've been waiting 5 years to have somebody for their class. It can be a little overwhelming. So, but all of them, I mean, they're just great teachers.
I very much was curious as to how that was gonna go. The other question that I had, going back to that, was there seemed to be hesitancy in other schools to change it because of the fact of how it was gonna be recorded on college transcripts. Do you remember when we were talking about that?
Correct.
So where has that gone? Have other has that?
Well, I think
leveled out?
colleges were forced to accept it because some state curriculums accepted it. For example, Georgia, and there's a few other ones that Utah maybe, who force their schools to teach integrated. And actually, the way that worked out is now Georgia's thinking about not going back to traditional because they force their teachers to do it, and they didn't take that process of building it themselves and seeing the usefulness of it. So I think we did it the right way of building it ourselves, and we geared it directly towards Westmont kids.
Yeah.
So
I mean, the amount of work that must have gone into that. It just is.
if you look at the shared drive, we created a shared drive for for math 6 through 12. The amount that's in there, I don't know, I'm sure Google may call us up to question why are we using that much space on the Google Drive, because it's a massive amount of work that we create and still create every day. It's just getting filled up and filled up and filled up. Sometimes through the process, I would get aggravated with, standards, and some of it is just boring work. And you're in a room and you're getting aggravated typing and all of that. And the consultant would notice that, and she would put me on like technology duty, like, okay, clean up the folders and organize this, and because she could sense that I was getting frustrated. So it's actually a pretty well organized folder for however well you can organize Google Docs.
Well, I just have to say, I very much appreciate hearing back how specifically things are going, especially when you do something like a big upheaval, like changing the entire, math structure. From what I hear from some of these, I can't even say children anymore, that doesn't seem to be struggles that, used to be the case. And I hope you know what I mean by struggles. There's a mature struggling, not that like pulling your hair out struggling. So I can appreciate that from a number of
I
different
think we have a great program
avenues.
for all levels of kids. So,
And obviously the test, to the extent that there are tests that we have to deal with, can't get around that.
right, standardized tests for what they are.
Right. But it sounds like they're also learning, which is, I know sometimes people think those are two different things.
Right.
They're not. So, anyway, I just have to say thank you. Thank you to all of the math department for bringing that rigor up to where it is.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Again, Joel's a better parent than I am. I just want that written down.
Make sure that shows up in the meeting minutes.
In the minutes.
Right, Joel, right?
Joel's better. Okay, the next item, policy first reading, we are removing that from this agenda, and we will be discussing that at a future meeting. The next item is board reporting from the IASB conference. So, on the weekend of November 16th, 17th, and 18th, thank you all very much.
Thank
you
you.
all. Board members and Kevin Carey and Kim Anderson, we all went downtown and had the opportunity to go to the Tri-Conference. And it's a wealth of information, and I'm happy to say for another year that all 7 board members and our superintendent and business manager went. And so it's continuing education for us. And so I always like to say that I think it's important for us to share with the community just a couple little things that we found most interesting. There are two board members who aren't here tonight. I totally talked to them about like sharing that the next time that they're here. So if somebody wants to take a minute and go first and talk a little bit about.
So one of the things I like to take an opportunity to do when we're there is kind of review. I always try to attend one of the sessions about kind of the legislative changes and the things that are coming down from the state that then filter down their way to the districts. And so a lot of the conversation in this particular session, there was a state senator and a state representative there, and they were kind of talking about of course, the evidence-based funding. That was a big part of it, and tweaks and changes that still have to go on with that to ensure that it's working the way that they wanted it to work. Discuss some changes with broad-based things. School safety is always in there. They talked about some of the difficulties CPSs have been having with some of the sex abuse cases that have come up, and that they're talking about things about minimum teacher salaries, particularly downstate, and teacher shortages, because fewer students are going into education, and what to do about that, or what legislatively they could propose to encourage people to take up education as a career. They brought up something, and I'll have to talk to Kim about it a little more. It was something about a property tax relief grant. So if you know a little bit about that or whatever, I didn't quite get the whole thing, but it was something that they made it sound like districts could apply for, and they encouraged you to apply for it. So it's just kind of good to get kind of a positive feel, because so many, over the past couple of years, a lot of the emphasis has been on the budget stalemate and the lack of a state budget and the detrimental effect that had on school districts. And so it was good to have a more visionary and hopeful, approach and get some feedback like that from one of these legislative sessions. So I enjoy hearing that, kind of keeping up to date on that.
I was the most impactful part of the weekend for me was because of two things. One, because it was an amazing presentation, but two, because I had already sat through a couple of or at least one session about equity in education. But seeing Ruby Bridges speak, and Kevin and Laura and I sat together, and by the end of it, I don't think there was a dry eye in the room, but I can tell you that I've had to leave the building and come back an hour later, and the line to meet her and get her book signed was not even dwindling at that point. But she was an amazing speaker, an unbelievable story to tell, and just tied right in with a couple of the equity things, equity sessions that I went to, and I found those both enlightening for obvious reasons that it's an area we need, all school boards, all districts need to focus on. But it was also really good to hear what others were experiencing, and how even districts as close by as Willowbrook have committed to equity and what they're working towards. I thought that was a really interesting part, and as the demographics of all districts change, equity is going to become a forefront for boards to focus on, because I think the board has to take the lead on that specific area.
I can tell you what my favorite one was that I went to. They were all very good, but on Sunday, I went to the last one on Sunday morning. I went to hear Daryl Scott speak about Rachel's Challenge. And there were so many schools that wanted to learn about it, and they wanted to implement it. And there were some schools that did. I was very proud to be one of them. But his presentation, I don't think there was a dry eye that left that conference room. He had footage of the actual, when it had happened, and I was just thinking, oh my God, how can you do this? How can you watch this? But he and his wife are so committed to spreading her code of ethics around, And it's kind of taken on, you know, with the anti-bully thing and what you can do and how they could have maybe done it, and how it grew out of there. And he had numbers on how many kids they had prevented from doing suicide or much worse. And I could have sat there all day and kept listening to him, but it was extremely moving, and I was very proud that our district adopted it several years ago when it first started, so it was very good.
So I had a couple of things that really stood out to me. I think, first of all, I want to give our district a lot of credit because in a lot of the sessions that I was in, you know, the speakers were talking about best practices across a number of areas. And I felt very proud that I feel like we could very strongly say we are following many of the best practices and that our district is doing really well in a lot of areas. So that was, you know, I think very affirming from my perspective. And I think the community at large would be proud if they could hear some of those best practices spoken about and then reflect on how our district is doing. I did go to a session on student achievement through governance, and that was really interesting. A big highlight was the level of communication as a board, the level of open communication with superintendents and administrators in the schools, and how that long-term leads to student achievement. I attended the equity session with John. That was a great session, and Marie, I think you were in that one as well. But the one that really stood out to me was a session on communication, and it really focused on, you know, a lot of people think about communication and they think, how can the school district communicate to the community? And the session was really more about how can you communicate with your community. So some of the best practices noted in that session was really about ongoing communication forums where the community can leverage their voice with the school board without having to come into a meeting and stand up during you know, the open session, but just creating regular practices where the community can have communication with us versus, you know, us pushing communications to them and then having open forums in public meetings. So I thought that was really interesting and maybe something for us to think about longer term.
Well, I had gone to a number of them, and again, the one about the equity that we went to that I thought was extremely interesting. And there's one quote that our speaker had given to us, and it talks about excellence. And we keep the bar high in all we do. We educate students for life and for reflective citizenship. We empower students and employees in the preservation of their identity and culture. Substance, depth, and critical thinking are more important than either compliance or test scores. And we just did have a discussion on math, but it was also good to hear, like, the teachers and that talk about they're not just there to just teach a subject, they're there to connect with the students. So I found that meeting that we went to, or that session we went to on Friday, was extremely interesting and really helpful. And then another one that I went to on Saturday was Educational Policy in an Age of Student Activism. And there were a lot of people in that room. And one of the things that they talked about was balancing the freedoms of, you know, First Amendment and yet school culture and that. And one of the things that they had talked about, they kind of focused on, because there's not a lot of time, but they talked about how when the students had that walkout day back last year in March, and they talked about how some schools just really screwed that up. And when they talked about some of the successful schools and how they handled that, it was also affirming to me the way our school handled it, that we talked about it, and we talked about that the students had the right to do this, but it had to be done in a respectful manner, and, you know, the kids weren't suspended and all that. And so I think that they talked about how far that goes then, like the very next day, like how you work with your students, and, you know, you're spending all your time teaching the kids to be smart and be, you know, learn from all different avenues. And then if you shut it down for something like that, then, you know, you've lost. So it was really good to, when they do these presentations, to find that we're also in the avenue that we're kind of doing things right. And then the last one that I went to was interesting because it was about effective meetings and productive board meetings. And I found that it's interesting once in a while to actually just start thinking about our own education, because I think the minute you think you've got all the answers, then you're done learning. So I decided to go to one of these meetings because I think the ISB does a great job of teaching us to do our job. And it was very, very interesting, and there's a couple of things that I would like to bring to us when I know we're going to be talking about having board sessions with the ISB, but one of the things that they talked about was like trying to bring your students to the community. So when we've done that in the past, where we certainly do public recognition very well, but it might be nice to start maybe having a couple kids from the jazz band to come, or I know like the fourth graders do a play, and, you know, maybe have a couple minutes of that and stuff, and it kind of connects you more to why we do what we do, and I thought that was a very interesting thing. They definitely talked about, like, there was a lot of people in this room too. I somehow picked these, and there was a very few, I would say 5% of districts that taped their meetings or had their meetings, and they were surprised that there were 5% that did. And so they were asking some of us some questions, and I said, well, you're a public servant. Public is supposed to see what you're doing. But we also talked about how that is helpful in that if somebody asks a question, like if something comes up and they're like, well, I didn't know about so-and-so and so-and-so, you can always refer somebody to, well, you know, that we discussed that at a board meeting, and you can go and look at that. And people said they hadn't even thought about that and stuff. So that was really, it was really interesting because there was a couple things that I took away from that. They did talk about that some districts, they analyze every one of their board meetings. I didn't think we really wanted to do that. I don't think we need to analyze our board meetings. But I did find that when they were talking about the structure and the setup of their meetings, that I think we have learned through the years the best way to have a productive meeting and stuff. So you know, I am thankful to serve with a board that also thinks it's important for us to continue our education. So
Yeah, I think it would be wonderful to have a sampling of students from each school to show what they're doing, even if they just come and read. It engages the community more.
right.
I would love to see that happen.
It was really interesting. A lot of schools, some people came up to me afterwards and asked just about this thing. We have a great partnership with our village, and we get to use such a professional setting like this. But that, you know, maybe we could do things with something the students are doing if they win a
Maybe the
poetry
building
contest.
principals can put it out there for teachers and.
Yeah.
I'd
But I
like to
thought
see
that was
that.
interesting because a lot of districts, they go to like a different school for their meetings and stuff like that, and they do things like that, but they don't have the professional setting like we do. But we could certainly try to bring some kids in here. So anyway, we could talk about that, you know,
Sure.
as we go forward. I think that might be kind of fun. All right, so we're good? All right, move on to action items then. The first one is approval of athletic sign sponsor. Anybody have any questions? How do you say that,
Chala?
I didn't even realize it. Okay, the chair will entertain a motion to approve Chowla Orthodontics athletic sign sponsor as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Price,
Yes.
Mr. Rudy,
Yes.
Ms. Wilson,
Yes.
Mrs. Coyle,
Yes.
Mrs. Charlton.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, the chair will entertain a motion to authorize and direct the treasurer to pay any bills received in December 2018 that have been budgeted for the 2019 fiscal year as presented.
So moved. Second.
And roll call, please.
Mr. Rudy,
Yes.
Ms. Wilson,
Yes.
Mrs. Coyle,
Yes.
Mr. Price,
Yes.
Mrs. Charlton.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, the chair will entertain a motion to approve the 5-year contract for copier service with Minolta
Yeah.
Business Solutions USA, Inc., in the amount of $75,900, subject to attorney review and approval.
So moved.
Second?
And roll call, please.
Ms. Wilson,
Yes.
Mrs. Coyle,
Yes.
Mr. Price,
Yes.
Mr. Rudy,
Yes.
Mrs. Charlton.
Yes.
Thank you.
The chair will entertain a motion to approve the 5-year lease of Minolta copiers with American Capital Financial Services, Inc., in the amount of $96,205.80 as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mrs. Coyle,
Yes.
Mr. Price,
Yes.
Mr. Rudy,
Yes.
Ms. Wilson,
Yes.
Mrs. Charlton.
Yes.
Thank you.
And the last one is the resolution to adopt the levy. The chair will entertain a motion to adopt the resolution setting the 2018 tax levy as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Price,
Yes.
Mr. Rudy,
Yes.
Ms. Wilson,
Yes.
Mrs. Coyle,
Yes.
Mrs. Charlton.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, superintendent's report.
I just have one item in my report this evening, and typically at this meeting, I share with our school community a little bit about the process we go through when we have inclement weather and we may be looking at school closure. And then after that is when we actually have that type of weather. So we actually had a day already. And just for our school community, we will be adding a day to the school calendar. So technically now, June 3rd will be the final day of the school year. But the process, we know that that process, and parents like to have that information because they need to think about childcare and those things. And so anytime there's a threat of inclement weather, as a school district, we're monitoring the weather regularly, and we're also in communication with other school districts to see what their thinking is. We contact our bus company, and we're not only concerned about getting our students to school safely, but also our staff as well. In some cases, our staff is traveling greater distances. And then we, superintendents, usually we all agree to have a phone conference. Interesting enough, when we had our most recent snow day at the end of our Thanksgiving break, we actually had 3 conference calls, earlier in the afternoon and then later in the evening, and then finally about, I think it was 8:30 at night is when we made the final decision. If we can make a decision early, we will communicate that. Sometimes, though, we need to wait till the morning to see exactly what's occurring and what road conditions are like, but typically by 5 in the morning, we make a definitive decision at that time. And then we will communicate that in as many different, using social media in as many ways as possible, so that we get the word out as quickly as possible to our families. And we know going into making that decision that there are going to be some parents who are happy with the decision, whether we have school or don't have school, and we know that some families are not going to be as happy. But we do take the safety of our students and our staff very seriously in making that decision.
I would like to reiterate again that that decision is not made by the board members, that decision is made by the superintendent.
Yes.
I remember going to an ISB conference early on, and they say, remember to tell your families that you are not the ones that make that decision. But in all seriousness, though, it's very much appreciated that that there's so many factors that go into making that decision. So, okay. Do you have anything else? Okay. Are there any board reports?
I wanted to mention that I had the opportunity at the end of November to attend Miller Math and Game Night. It was a family night hosted at Miller Elementary School where the administration and all of the teachers were there, and they had individual tables set up. Families were welcome to attend and play different math games and interact with each other. And it was a really fun, great event, and I just wanted to congratulate Mr. Weiler and the staff of Miller on that event.
Okay, anything else? All right, future events. Westmont High School Winter Concert and Student Art Exhibit is December 13th at 7 o'clock at Westmont High School. The Manning Miller School Winter Band Concert, tentatively scheduled for December 17th at 6 o'clock at Westmont High School. More details to follow. Westmont Junior High School Winter Choral Concert is December 18th, 7 o'clock at Westmont High School. The winter break will be from December 24th through January 6th. Classes resume January 7th, 2019. And the next school board meeting will be January 8th, 2019, 7 o'clock here at Westmont Village Hall. We don't have any votes. after that. The chair will entertain a motion to enter closed session for the purpose of discussing personnel issues and student discipline.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Rudy.
Yes.
Ms. Wilson.
Yes.
Mrs. Coyle.
Yes.
Mr. Price.
Yes.
Mrs. Charlton.
Yes. Before we go, I'd like to wish everyone happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and we'll see everyone again in 2019. There will not be a vote after closed.